Greetings, it's time to graft again. I have scion wood for grafting available in my web store, skillcult.com/store, and on figbid.com as auctions. The auctions start ending tonight. We're going to talk about all that. We're going to talk about the new varieties I'm releasing for 2024, of which there are a whopping 8. And we're also going to revisit some old varieties that I've released in the past and talk about those because I've learned some new stuff that's worth talking about. So lots of new varieties. 2 of those varieties, I think it's Integrity, definitely Clarion, I think Integrity, are in the web store because I just had a lot of scions for those. I put up way more auctions this year because I had a lot of varieties where I was in the range of like 25 to 30 scions, which is like not really enough to put them in the web store. So I just put a lot more on auction, and the auctions are stacked on top of each other, so they're like running at the same time. For each given variety, the auctions end 5 minutes apart. They start ending tonight, and they're all finished by 10 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow. I don't know what's left in the web store. I haven't looked. I haven't looked at the auctions to see what the prices are like, but from a few people have mentioned to me in private communications that they're going pretty high. I'm not surprised for things like black and red or jelly bean cider, which there's only 3 scions of jelly bean cider, and it's pretty neat apple. And I know there's a lot of cider makers out there that are probably very anxious to get a hold of that and grow it out and try it. So anyway, if the auctions go high, that's great because I need as much money as possible for my homestead fund. I may have enough to start seriously looking at land by like late summer this year. We'll see. But I'm really holding out for a nice property. So if it takes me another couple of years, whatever it takes, I don't want to compromise too much and end up with something that is too limited for me to expand into. Because as nice as this property is, it really doesn't have enough flat farmland and the water's limited, and I need to fix those 2 problems if I'm going to move. But that's another story. Okay, black and red. Black and red is a cross between King David and Rubaiyat. It is quite an intriguing little apple. So black and red combines 2 things in an apple that I've never seen in one apple, which is extremely dark red skin and extremely red flesh. And the flesh is actually more of a true red than a pink. By the way, I don't know color theory, but what is pink? Is pink just red with a bunch of white in it? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I think there's more to it than that. Anyway, this is a true red, and when it's at its ripest and darkest, it's like a nice velvety red. It's quite remarkable. As you can see this picture here, I showed that picture to a friend a few days ago, and I was like, yeah, I've been breeding apples, and I'm showing him pictures, and he's like, wow. And he's like, that's not an apple though. And I'm like, yeah, that's an apple. And he's like, no, that's an apple. It's something else really. And when people, like if you were to hand that thing to somebody and they bite into it, they're just going to be like, what? What is that? Because you can't tell from the outside at all. The skin is just a nice uniform dark red. I would say that it's as dark as black strawberry. At one point I thought it was even darker. But I think it's probably about equivalent. But the flesh is much darker than black strawberry. It's a better apple than black strawberry overall if you take like the overall eating quality and, usability of the apple. The thing that black strawberry has besides that beautiful dark red skin is strawberry flavor, which is not, at that level as I've never tasted in another apple. Black and red has more of like the aromatic berry type flavors, maybe a little kind of just mixed fruit and berries kind of a thing, typical red fleshed apple. Out of all my red fleshed apples, I wouldn't say it's on the upper end of strength of those flavors. I mean, if I were to improve something about it, that would be one thing I'd want to bump the flavors up higher, but I'm insatiable with that. Like flesh color, darker flesh color, more flavor, always more. As far as flesh color goes, though, when this thing's fully developed, it's quite dark. As I recall, it ripens pretty late. I think it might have been late November. I can't remember for sure. It's good. It's a tart apple. I would say it's on the tart end. I have a feeling it's going to make really good red applesauce. Like finally the apple that's going to be really, really red has the necessary tartness, because applesauce made with apples that aren't tart is terrible. It's just bland and yucky. I have high hopes for that, and I don't think there's another apple I have that's going to be more suitable for that, just from what I've tasted. But I haven't had enough to try it yet. So yeah, this is definitely in the category known as black apples, like Black Oxford, Kingston Black, Black Wine Sap. There's a group of apples that are known as black apples, just have this really super dark red skin. It's pretty striking looking on the tree, so that alone is pretty neat. The skin is a little thick, but it's not any worse than King David, and you know, that's not uncommon. I mean, I was just eating something the other day. Lady Williams also has a very thick skin. I mean, it's just a thing. I released this because it's very unique. It has really, really red flesh. The skin color is really neat. Overall quality is equal to or better than the average heirloom apple that I grow here of any kind. But overall, it's a pretty solid apple. And when you look at the quality of red fleshed apples available in general right now, it's way above average. And as far as breeding goes, this is a solid choice. I mean, it has that beautiful dark red skin. It has really red flesh. You know, crossing this with any just good non-red fleshed apple would be great. Crossing it with other red fleshed apples might be great depending on what they are. Something like Pink Parfait is just like a no-brainer for sure. Very useful in breeding, I think. I mean, it's one thing to take red fleshed apples and cross them with these really dark, like black type apples and come out with what black and red is, but it's a different thing to start with an apple that already has both of those traits. I mean, that's pretty cool. So crossing this also with apples that are very red already, maybe not even that red, but just generally very red, could yield some interesting results too. Jelly bean cider. This is a pretty exciting apple to me. It has intense, like fruit candy like flavors. It took me a long time to name this apple. I went through many different names. I had a list and I would go back and forth, like it's going to be this, it's going to be that, it's going to be this. And I really like jelly bean cider. I think that was a solid choice for this apple. It is a dwarf apple, and it's partial, I would call it like partially columnar, I think, at this point. It's hard to say. This is still early in the game. It's only like, you know, a few years old, and I only have one other graft of it, which is starting to grow and show what it's going to do. It's a little more branchy than a real true columnar, I would say that. So, you know, that's a spectrum, right? There's dwarf, which has, you know, it's a genetic dwarf, and a genetic dwarf will have really closely spaced buds. Like the buds on the branch will be very close together, and then, you know, the branch only ends up very short. So it has that, but some of them will branch a lot and some of them don't. And some of them tend to just grow like a few straight columns, and anything that comes out the side will just grow maybe a little bit up and then stop and just fruit. So that's more like what a columnar is. In an extreme columnar, there's almost no side branching, and it's just like a stick, and it makes a bunch of fruit spurs, and it just makes fruit. So this is somewhere in between those, I would say, but more on the columnar end. The fruit is very small. The texture is not great. Like, you can eat it for sure, but it's kind of coarse and juicy and a little soft. It's not great texture for eating, but people will eat it probably because it just tastes so good anyway. However, when I juiced it, I was like, okay, well, here, this flavor is amazing, but what's going to happen when I juice it? If I juice it, is that flavor going to stick around? And I juiced some and tasted it, and it was like, wow, amazing. Just it's like it's like a fruit juice blend, right? You know, you get these fruit juice blends that are kind of like fruit punch with different kinds of fruit juice and maybe an apple base. It's kind of like that, except you don't have to add anything. Now think about that. That's pretty neat. And if this is just the start and we can breed these things with all different flavors, then you could have like a line of apple juices, say, that have different flavors and can be named for that, and you don't have to blend anything. That's just super intriguing. I think that's an amazing idea, and we can breed for that. I'm sure of it. We could do that on purpose and come up with like a range of different flavors, you know. On top of that, the juice was just very balanced, and you know, it had a great sugar acid balance. Like, if you took the flavor out, it would be an excellent apple juice on its own, and not all apples are even close to make, you know, the same equivalency of juice. Like, this is a very good juice in general. Plus it has this amazing flavor. Then I was like, okay, well, that's great, but will it survive canning. So if I can the stuff and you're going to, put it up in jars and then drink it later, or, maybe sell it commercially. So I heated the juice up to hot pack it, which means that, you get it up to a certain temperature and then you pour it in a sterilized jar and you just seal it, and versus like putting it in a jar and then cooking it in a bath. Subjecting it to like a little bit more intense cooking, might change this. But I left that around for a few days and my friend was visiting. So I cracked that thing open and we tasted it. And we were both like, wow, it tastes like, pretty much tasted like fresh juice. And it still had all that flavor. That same friend, I didn't tell her at all what I was feeding her. I just walked out and I handed her a slice of this apple out of the fridge, just a little slice. And she bit into it and immediately she said, it tastes like candy. And I fed her that juice and she was super enthusiastic about it, just like me, and like, wow, that's really different. Jelly bean cider is exciting. I could imagine it in the future. Well, okay, so I don't know how these dwarf trees adapt to real culture, like in the field, growing, in quantity. But I could imagine, since these trees are very small, I doubt, like, if you let them grow all they want, I doubt they're going to get more than 8 feet tall ever, max like 12 feet. And you can easily control them for size, whatever size you want. Since they're going to be shorter, you can keep them really short. You could put them very close in the row, maybe as close as 12 inches, like 12, 16, 18 inches in the row. And then the rows could be close together, probably, less than 6 feet apart. And I could see just having, rows of these things producing little flavor factories, producing little apples for juice. Another thing I was thinking is, how great would it be for like a juice bar to get a hold of these things, to be able to just order boxes of them, right? They're only this big, so you can throw them in most commercial juicers whole, like no cutting up. Right now, what are they even juicing? They're probably juicing like, basically these boring dessert apples like Honey Crisp and whatever's available. And this thing is just a whole nother level of juice. So you could provide them cheaper. There's no middleman, like for direct marketing I'm talking about, right? So they can go online to you and they just order boxes and you ship them to them, and they're going to be cheaper. You don't have to be as picky about cosmetics, right? If they have some scab or they're a little lumpy or whatever, as long as they're good and don't have bugs in them. And you can also sell that. That's a selling point. My friend Eliza Greenman is on this, ugly fruit kick, where she's like, well, the ugly fruit is more nutritious. So sell that, use it as a selling point. I mean, it could work. Anyway, I think there's a real possibility for little apples like this to be part of some kind of an industry. I mean, they're going to be easy to manage, easy to pick. I think that the ideal would be figuring out how to grow them on their own roots. It does get a lot of burnout, so that probably means it will root easily. And you could have you could stool them. So you could set up like hundreds of trees and just mound dirt up on them each year, and then they're going to grow roots on the bases of the shoots. You cut them off, there you have a new tree on its own roots. We'll see how all that plays out, but it's an exciting development, very, very intriguing for breeding. I'll be crossing this with hard candy cider, which is very similar, but has probably, I think jelly bean cider has it beat for intensity of flavor even. Maybe a little less complex, I'm not sure. What the flavors are in jelly bean cider, maybe watermelon. It's hard to say though. It just kind of tastes like generic hard candy, I think. We'll see as it fruits more. So yeah, I only had 3 scions of that, and then I scrounged as many small scions and scraps as I could, and I'll be able to make a bunch of grafts now and try to get this propagated out more so that I have more than 3 scions next year. But it's going to be a slow going because it grows slow and it doesn't branch a lot. Okay, Musketeer. Musketeer is super unique. I'm really excited about this one too. Every year I've tasted it, it's impressed me. The very first year, which often apples aren't great the first year, it was extremely richly flavored with what tasted like watermelon candy, which I love. I'm always looking for those artificial fruit flavors, kind of flavors in there. The second year, it had that as background, or more like a more complex mixed fruit flavors, which again, I love. Very crisp. And on top of it, it had this strange musky flavor. And I was like, at first I was like, what is that? And I was like, wow, it's like musk. And then this year, okay, but by the way, after the first year, I was trying to straighten the tree up because it was laying way down on the ground, and I heard it snap under there, and it probably broke off most of the roots. So the thing is like, and it's all sunburned and like has borers in the stem. The thing is in horrible shape. And so then it fruited that way the second year, and the apples were still like really intriguing and delicious, and I really liked that musky flavor. I was like, this is weird, but it's really good. So then this year, it fruited again the same way. Again, it was the same thing, like super crisp, fine-grained flesh, really nice eating texture, like solid and crispy, but not hard, with that musky flavor again. And the flavor, like the fruit flavors and the musky flavor are really different, but somehow they seem to blend and be part of the same thing, flavor profile. I don't know how to explain it. Whatever the bottom line is, I was like impressed. Every year it's fruited. I really like eating them. I always wish I had more. And it managed to pull that off on a sick, weakly tree that's just kind of like flopped over and barely half alive. Then I was propping it up again this year, same thing, snap. I heard a big snap like underground, so I probably busted off even more roots. We'll see if it even survives, but of course it's grafted out elsewhere to find out what happens with it. Very excited about this apple. This should be a class of apples. So late this year, I was trying to get it together to take some pictures of hard candy cider, and I wanted some hard candies. So I ordered these English fruit hard candies with like, they're good candies, they're naturally flavored. And one of those was currant, and I tasted that, and the first thing that hits you is this musky flavor. And I was like, oh, that's it. I bet it's black currant flavor. I haven't had time yet, but when I look up black currant flavor in apples, like in old stuff from England, I bet I'll find some references that say this tastes like black currant. So I'm sure it's in other apples. Now that this was just so strong of a component that it couldn't be ignored, and I had to address it and come up with a name. But now I've tasted it in a few other apples, and pretty strongly in one other apple, which is Christmas Pink, which is an Eder apple. And Musketeer is a cross between Rubaiyat and Pink Parfait, which are both Eder apples. And then I also tasted it in some other apple of mine that's an Albert Eder apple derivative, one of the red-fleshed apples. So I think it's in that line. Again, interesting flavors out of the Eder line. And I think we'll be able to reinforce this. It probably should be its own category because it's so unique and strong, and some people are going to love them and want more of them. Maybe some people won't like them. I really don't know what to say about that. I mean, I love it. I think it's great, and I want to eat a lot more of them. I'll be pursuing that flavor and breeding for sure, using that as my main parent. So that's it in a nutshell. Super crisp, fine-grained, really great texture, intriguing, complex fruit flavor that's quite strong, and this unique musky flavor over the top. What's not to like? It gets scab really bad, so that's something not to like. So we got to take this and cross it with disease-resistant apples, just cross it with other apples, maybe find other apples that have even a trace of that musky flavor, right? Something out of the Eder line, something else, and then cross those together, and maybe that'll pop. Again, just shows like there's stuff lurking in these genes of the apple genome that we just don't know what's going to pop up. I mean, look at black strawberry. Like, its parent didn't taste like strawberries, but it's just in there lurking, waiting to come out. Hel Kitty. Hel Kitty is an adorable little oval apple, very clean looking, beautiful color, kind of a pinkish red. Small flattened apples. The first time I saw this thing fruit a few years ago, when it was just getting going, I was like, that's adorable. That little apple's super cute. And that's held up. This year it produced loads of these cute little apples. They developed more pink flesh than ever. They have like a light, berry-like aromatics going on. Really neon intense pink flesh. Like, you have to see it in person to appreciate it when it develops. It usually isn't solid pink. It's usually kind of a mixed pink. This apple is very tart, and it never mellows all the way out. Like, it's going to be an apple for people who like tart apples for sure. Late ripening, scab, I don't know yet. It has oddly light green leaves, like nothing else in my orchard. Out of hundreds of seedlings and other varieties, Nothing looks like this. It's conspicuously light green, and then almost yellowish green, and then it just gets yellower and yellower as the fall progresses. So that's really interesting too. So that's Wixon X Rubaiyat, and the third in the trio of Wixon X Rubaiyat crosses that I've released. The other ones are Tomboy and Cherub. Maybe my favorite Apple name yet. I think that's hilarious. There used to be a girl band in the Bay Area called Hel Kitty. Next is Clarion. So Clarion, previously known as Ice Princess. I only released it this year, but I've been referring to it as Ice Princess, or the apple previously known as Ice Princess, for years. This apple, like the first time it fruited, I was like, okay, it's super late. It was wintertime. It's incredibly crisp. Like, it was incredibly crisp, just like popping. You know, I was thinking, wow, is this the crispest apple I've ever eaten, kind of thing. But probably not, but that's what I thought. But then as it fruited more, like the season became earlier. So the Ice Princess thing was like, okay, it fruits in the winter and it's super like icy crisp. Anyway, I thought the name just didn't fit, and I wanted to sit on it, figure out what it's about, see what it's going to do for a few years, get a beat on it, on its character and what it's going to do, and then give it a name. And the name was Clarion. So all the names I entertained had to do with like lightness, brightness, clean, words and concepts like that. Clarion is a primitive trumpet, best known maybe from the Brandenburg Concertos by Bach, which is amazing. You should listen to him. Best classical music ever. There were other great names too. There's another one that took me forever to name. I had like a long list and I kept shuffling them, saying, this is it. No, maybe not. Maybe that's it, But I'm happy with that choice. The characteristic of the apple that is really the most definitive is it just has this very crisp, clean, bright, light flavor. It's difficult to explain, but it definitely evokes those kind of words and concepts. And also the appearance of the apple matches that. It's very, very smooth, almost like has like an inner glow to it. Aside from scab, it gets scab pretty bad, but when it doesn't have scab, it's just a really gorgeous glowing orb of an apple. And the taste kind of matches that. The taste also has a really clean finish. Like you eat it and it's kind of like these flavors are there and it's intriguing. They're light, they're aromatic, they're like high notes like pine, sometimes banana. There's more going on, but I can't really explain it. But then the flavor just kind of finishes off super clean. I really like them. I was tasting apples this year with a friend, and we'd pick like a basket of seedlings, just going through these apples, sampling them, and Clarion was our favorite. Both of us thought it was the most intriguing, like want to keep eating it apple. Another thing about this apple is that it has a very long season. One of its parents is grenadine. It's grenadine X golden russet. It does what grenadine does, where some of the apples ripen early. They don't just fall off the tree early. They ripen early, and then they fall off the tree. But it's like they're not what they're going to be when they're fully, like if they were allowed to develop and ripen longer, but they do seem to be pretty ripe, and those are usually good. So you get that whole early drop thing to eat, and then the ones that ripen after that just ripen over a long period and hang on the tree. And I won't be surprised if some years at some places that will extend into early winter at least. And I think it did this year. I can't remember for sure. The skin is quite thick on this apple, and it doesn't look it, and you wouldn't think it, but it is. And the skin is very greasy, waxy greasy. Like you can pick the apple and it's got this, just greasy feel to it, and you can wipe it and it'll polish up nice, but you can't get all that stuff off. It's just really strong. I think it's a great apple. I look forward to eating them for years to come. And welcome to the stable, Clarion. Okay, Twang and Integrity are two Williams Pride X Vixen crosses that are both early. They're summer apples. So Twang you might get as early as July, especially for cooking, and these are both cooking apples, by the way. But it's really more of an August apple, so like, I don't know, I'm not sure when yet, and it's going to vary where you are anyway. But these apples should be considered almost as a set, because one ripens earlier, Twang ripens earlier, then they overlap, and then Integrity finishes off the summer, and probably just into early fall when there start to be, more options available. So what's unique about these apples? Okay, I wouldn't say that either one of them is a lot of fun to eat. I mean, I've waffled back and forth on that with Twang. Integrity can be okay, especially for an early apple. And in both cases, you could kind of say that for an early apple, they can compete with most of what's out there, but they can't compete with like chestnut crab and Williams Pride as dessert apples. But what they do right is they hold their shape in cooking, and they're dense, solid apples, unlike any other early apple that I know of. So, of the early apples that I've grown, things like Early Harvest, Carolina Red June, just the standard early apples, July Red, they have a character, and they're known, like the stereotype of those early summer apples is, a little bit thin tasting, acidic, soft, and the texture goes mealy very quickly. These are really solid, heavy apples. And when you cook them, I finally got around to cooking them, and they held their shape really well. So they come out of their pie in like discrete slices, which is really cool. So I know nothing else that does that early in the season. If I were going to like farmers markets in a big urban area where there's like, chefs shopping for stuff, and you could get them these apples in the summer and be like, here, try making a pie, take some of these and try making a pie with this, or some kind of, baked dessert, compared to anything else you can get at this time of year, I'm pretty sure they'd come back for more. Again, I would consider them a set because they overlap and they're very similar. So I did a pie filling test with Carrie Pippin, which is a similar season. It overlaps with, but when all three of those will overlap at some point. And Carrie Pippin is known to be an especially high quality early apple. I'm not super fond of it myself personally, but it's pretty sharp and it makes a decent cooking apple. And I would have said like that's kind of the apple I would cook with at that season, right? And I have said that before. But I did a test where I just divided into 3 parts, and I put, one of each, Carrie Pippin, Twang, and Integrity. And Integrity won, but only by a tiny margin over Twang. And if you didn't tell me, I probably wouldn't even notice the difference. They're very, very similar when cooked. They have a similar flavor. They both hold their shape in cooking, and they both have plenty of acidity. You don't need to add any lemon or anything like that. Yeah, they both beat Carrie Pippin, and I think that's, significant. And all that is, reason enough to release them. I think they're a niche apple for sure. Somebody's going to like eating them, and they may grow very different some places than they do here. But like Twang it always seems to have something in the flavor that's just a little off. But when you bake it, you don't notice any of that. And Integrity has a pretty decent flavor, but the flesh is kind of almost, I call it foamy. Like Lady Williams has the same type of flesh. So does Red Winter Pie, which we'll talk about in a minute. All that just makes it, again, good for cooking. So some people might want to eat them, but I wouldn't buy them as an eating apple or an all-purpose apple. I would get them as a cooking apple for, that complex of desserts like pie, apple betty, apple crisp, apple crumble, and maybe apple cake. So Red Winter Pie also has that sort of foamy flesh. It doesn't hold its shape in cooking as well. But the thing about that one is I've been using it for years to cook with from about Thanksgiving. So it's always ripe enough to use at Thanksgiving. And I'll use probably at this point, I use about 50% of that, and then just go around and collect whatever else is available, like interesting seedlings, some red flesh stuff, and all that. It's just a good cooking apple for that season that hangs on the tree from Thanksgiving to New Year. I almost called it holiday pie. Maybe I should have. I don't know. Anyway, I wanted to give it kind of a pedestrian name because it's not an exciting, like, sensational or gimmicky apple in any way. It's just a solid performing, large, beautiful red, winter, off the tree winter pie apple. That's its niche. I don't want to eat them out of hand. I probably wouldn't make sauce out of them just because of the strange kind of almost foamy texture. But again, at this coming Thanksgiving, I'm probably going to pick like 50% of those over anything else in my entire orchard, heirlooms, everything else, and then fill in the rest with some just interesting apples to, usually apple pie filling is better blended anyway, just make it more complex. I don't know about scab. It may be slightly scab resistant. I can't remember for sure on that. It's a really good bear. It was the very first tree in all of my trial rows to flower. And it actually didn't really start cranking out fruit till later, but it's been very consistent, heavy producer, beautiful skin, like really smooth, dark, even skin color. And yeah, if you thin it, it gets quite large, which is handy for cooking. It just, makes everything go a little faster. I had lost the tag, so I knew it was grenadine X something, but it's definitely Lady Williams because it has the same flesh texture. It looks similar. And the flavor on that apple just gets more complex and strong as it goes into the season. And it's very similar. It's not as strong as, but similar to Lady Williams, kind of a complex, fruity type of flavor. Nice flavor. It does have a nice flavor. Okay, let's revisit a few older apples. Vanilla Pink. In the old trial rows, which are really crowded, and these trees under a lot of stress and drought and competition and light issues, this apple has always intrigued me, but I was always like, well, it has retained some primitive traits. It's, the skin is pretty thick and it's a little bit tannic, kind of on the high edge of tannic where you're like, much more than this and this isn't a dessert apple, right? But the flavor is so good, and I always, usually when I start eating one, I want to finish it. And that's kind of like my ultimate criteria. This year it finally fruited on a branch that I had grafted out, because as soon as anything shows any promise, real promise, I graft it out somewhere in the orchard because I want more exemplary fruit. I want more fruit. I want more scions. I want to see what it does out there. And also, if the tree dies in the trial rows, well, then I've lost the variety completely if it's not grafted anywhere else. So anyway, the branch I grafted out finally fruited. It made some enormous apples with just gorgeous neon pink flesh, which it always has, but this is just kind of was a little bit more, I guess, and just of a better overall quality, right? Better culture, bigger tree, more established, more roots, probably more water and food. And I was like, wow, this is much more impressive this year. It was really delicious and fun and amazing color. It does have residual negative traits that I don't want, those ones I just talked about. But one of my early goals was to improve on grenadine, because I thought, okay, well, this apple grenadine has the flesh color I want, it has the flavor I want, and let's just see if we can improve it, because the texture is terrible. It has very high tannins in the skin, super thick skin, and Vanilla Pink's like heads above, and a bunch of other stuff that I've fruited already is heads above grenadine. So mission accomplished in a big way, improving on grenadine. So we have to keep red fleshed apples in context, and I'll release stuff now that I probably, someone probably wouldn't release and I wouldn't release 10 years from now when we have a lot more options. And the bar is getting raised very rapidly now because there's other people doing this. Some of my stuff, like my best stuff, is, very refined. And as that happens, some of these varieties are going to fall to the wayside because the bar is going to be raised. So the context with red fleshed apples is the bar is set a little bit low right now. And so I'll release stuff that I might not release in the future. That said, if you handed this apple in good condition to almost anyone and they bite into it and see this like popping neon flesh and it's got these wonderful berry flavors, and the thing about Vanilla Pink and why it's named that is it has this background of like candy, vanilla-like background that's like it's like a rich, full backdrop on top of which these berry fruit type flavors are sitting. It was really good and intriguing. And again, like when I start eating one, I want to finish it. Whatever this brings into further generations using it for breeding is probably going to be pretty amazing. So I'm more excited about Vanilla Pink than ever this year, and just, seeing it under better culture. I don't know how it'll perform, or any of these, especially the red flesh, will perform elsewhere. In some places they may develop better and more red flesh, in other places less. It will probably vary by season. What are your conditions? I don't know. Well, that's, you guys are the beta testers for all this stuff. I can only test it here. Pink Lemonade is an apple that really changed its character when I got it grafted out on another tree. This year it was just like these big, beautiful apples with more pink flesh than I thought. I had originally named this Flaxen, which I thought was a great name for what it was at the time, but it was on this really stunted tree that's kind of fallen over. It's overbearing, it's shaded, and I was like, I want to name this Pink Lemonade because it actually will have like a little bit of citrus lemon flavor sometimes. Very rarely, and it's like subtle, but it will have it. But it's also just tart and peppy and perky, and it has like a little bit of pink flesh. But I was like, well, it just doesn't have enough pink flesh, and so I came up with another name. Once it fruited out here on another tree, and it produced these beautiful, big, like tart, sprightly, almost like fizzy, effervescent apples, is the way one taster explained it. And it had much more pink flesh. I was like, okay, I gotta go back and change the name of this. So sorry about that, but it had to be done. And it just goes to show you I should fruit a lot of this stuff a little bit longer before I name it and release it. You know, it's easy to jump the gun. And I have to say, overall, like it gets really bad sunburn here, so that's been a problem. There's been years where it just didn't perform well. But again, the tree's in just horrible shape. You know, I finally straightened it up this year, but it was like laying down with like sugarwood was also laying down practically on top of it, sunburned, just messed up. Yeah, I was kind of like, I was starting to question whether I should have released it at all. I didn't know how it was going to perform elsewhere. Part of the reason I released it was scab resistance. It seems to have very good scab resistance. So that's pretty remarkable to have a pink fleshed apple of this quality that also seems to be scab resistant. It's a little bit similar in some ways to pink pearl. I'd have to grow them side by side. I'm just getting pink pearl growing here and fruiting finally. I've never been super impressed with it, but I think it may end up being similar enough that it could almost be a replacement for pink pearl because it's scab resistant. That's major, and also is great for carrying that scab resistance forward in red fleshed apples. So now I'm pretty excited about this. I had a group of people here, my mom and some friends and neighbors, are walking through the orchard testing stuff, and they were all very impressed by that apple. My mom mentioned it later. She's like, you know what I really like was that pink lemonade apple. So yeah, cool apple, pink lemonade. That's in the store. Lots of scions this year. Tomboy, I got to taste that again for maybe kind of the second real time this year. I released it pretty much the first year. I think I'd added maybe a stunted fruit the year before, but I was like, wow, this is really good. I mean, people are going to want to grow and eat this. I was like, I can release this now. So this year I was like, okay, well, let's see if I did the right thing there and made the right call. And it was really delicious this year. As far as dessert crabs go, I mean, there's probably a bunch of dessert crabs we don't even know about that most people don't know about out there. So who knows? But I would say at this point, it's probably going to be in the top 10. Whether it'll compete with like chestnut crab, you know, I don't know, but it's really good. It's got pink flesh, it's rich, it's sprightly and well balanced, but a little bit on the more peppy end. Of those three Wix and Rubaiyat crosses, it's like the most balanced one. You know, Cherub is like ultra sweet, like cloyingly sweet, super polite, and Hel Kitty's just like in your face acid, you know, attitude. And Tomboy's kind of the one that's balanced. Beautiful little apples, kind of rustic and rough a little bit, but nice, more pink flesh development. And I see this a lot. The first time things fruit, like sometimes the red flesh seems to develop over a couple seasons and get stronger. I think I'm seeing that. So it is more pink flesh now. Not a ton, but enough to matter. Good apple. Tomboy. Graft it, grow it. Cherry Crush, yummy. I am really looking forward to eating these things year after year, and also to what else comes out of efforts to breed more cherry flavored apples, including from this apple as a parent. There's another apple where as it is fruited more, the flesh has become more pink. Sometimes it'll be solid pink, although it's a very light color. The flavors are pretty complex and delicious overall as a background, but the defining characteristic is definitely the cherry flavor. It varies. You'll get specimens that don't have much of it at all, especially early in the season, and then others where it really pops more. But it is the thing that I get after this apple for the most, although just overall it's just a pleasant apple to eat. So this year, during its season when it was ripe, like that was the apple I would go out. I'm like, I want an apple straight to the cherry crush tree, every time. It was just the best thing going at the season, and it's got to be now one of my favorite apples that I've bred. It's absolutely delicious. What could be improved? It is scabby. It gets scabbed pretty bad. I want more red flesh, and I want more cherry flavor. I mean, again, I'm insatiable with that. You're not gonna, at some point it might get to be too much, but we're a long way from that point. So for further breeding, that will be the goal, is red flesh, more cherry flavor, and then some apples that, there are things about it where like the dessert quality could be improved. Like when it really starts to get ripe, it's a short season dessert apple, it starts to decline pretty fast, and the flavor doesn't persist, and the flavor doesn't get stronger past that point, right? It kind of peaks and it's there, and then it starts to go and it's still good and it's still strongly flavored, maybe even more strong, and then it just declines and it's useless and mealy and no good. So longer season, maybe a little bit crisper or something like that. Yeah, I don't remember where I was, but it's a great apple. It gets burnout, really a lot of burnout. So again, it's probably going to be something that we could grow on its own roots pretty easy. Maybe even able to stick cuttings. So this year I took some cuttings and I just stuck them, but to see what'll happen and see if they'll root. January russet. That's another apple that as I got it out of the trial rows, I mean, I was already pretty into it, but once I got it out on a real tree fruiting in the open with more sunlight, it grew bigger, it's more refined. I really like this apple. Lots of times I was eating them this year just going, wow, this is really good. I just want to finish this apple. It is not, though, a polite apple. I mean, it's got a rough skin. It's very peppy and tart. I would say it's on the tart end. It kind of demands something from you when you eat it. It's not like white bread America kind of diet type of apple. That said, like I said, I really like eating them. At its season, I mean, it can't compete overall with dessert quality with Pink Parfait in any way, but it's very different, and I really like them. I'd rather eat them probably than Lady Williams, certainly than Pomo Sinel, because it tastes like bananas, and I don't like that. For further breeding of late apples, trying to breed really super high quality, like the quality of like Ashmead's Kernel and Golden Russet were just like pinnacles of apple flavor at their best. Apples like that hang into the winter, I think it's, really, really valuable. And at this point, basically I always wish I had more of them to eat. And it'll be ripe as early as late December, but mostly it's, in January there, probably like first part to mid-January here anyway. I don't know how it would ripen if you picked it and held it. I wouldn't count on it, but you could try. You could try picking it in like November or as late as you can and then holding it over. Maybe it would ripen fine in storage. It may very well, who knows. Hard candy cider. I finally got around. I had plenty of apples, and late in the season, one of my patrons came by and helped out for a couple days. Thanks a lot. That was super helpful. We were out there like charlesing up the trees, and I was like, damn, we should really juice some of these. So we gathered a bunch of those off the ground, hard candy cider, took them inside, juiced them, and the juice is delicious. The flavor comes through in the juice, that strong, complex, hard candy flavor. And it has a high measure of tannin. Like in the juice, you could really taste the tannin. So this is going to be, I have a feeling it's going to be a choice cider apple. We're just not going to know until somebody ferments it out into a good cider and see if that flavor persists or not. That's the big question with hard candy cider, but it's been very productive. It's definitely a cider apple. It's got very tannic skin. The texture's not very good, and it's got a lot of flavor. By the way, there's another apple growing right next to it, which is not Grenadine X Lady Williams like hard candy. It's Grenadine X Golden Russet, although it looks like it's really probably Grenadine X Allen's Everlasting. That also looks like a promising cider apple, and I ate some specimens of that late, and they had a very similar strong like fruit candy like flavor late in the season. Very tannic, very productive, really interesting little flat potential cider apples. So we'll see about that in the future. Anyway, hard candy cider passed the juice test. I don't think it's quite as strong though as jelly bean cider, but probably more of a like, I think this apple has potential to be a good single varietal cider. If anything, maybe it needs to be a little more tart, but I think it's okay on that probably too. So that's plenty. I'm not going to revisit any more older apples. And I have now an index page. If you go to my website, SkillCult.com, at the top, click on projects and follow the apple breeding link. And there's links to all of my apples with descriptions. Like each one has its own page now, and you can always look there for like updated information. If I come up with anything I want to add, I'll try to go through those every year or two and add more information. What's coming in the future? Almost certainly Grenadine X Gold Rush 11.7. Several people had asked if I was going to release that because I was so enthusiastic about it this past year. I just want to fruit it again. I want to see what it does in the trial rows again this year. It seems like a real solid apple, and it was delicious this year. I ate a lot of them. I could eat a lot more of them. A lot of those Grenadine Gold Rush crosses are very similar and look similar, but each one might have like a slightly different season or do something that the other ones don't, or something like that. I have another one that's a Rubaiyat X Pink Parfait cross that has very red flesh. It tastes like roses. I already have a name for it, and I was tempted to put it out this year, but I'm just like, no, I should sit on this for another year or two, fruit it, eat it, make sure I like the name, make sure it's not going to do anything weird, too weird. But so far, like the best specimens of this apple this year, they were really intriguing, solid, good performing, way above average red fleshed apples, and quite red, dark red too. Lots of interesting flavors going on. So that's probably going to get released. There's some other stuff. There's one Rubaiyat X Pink Lady cross that's real tart and very bright pink flesh. We'll see about that one. There's that little flat cider apple I mentioned. That thing looks just like it would be a workhorse in the orchard, and it's got, typical cider attributes that seem very promising. And there's plenty of other stuff too. I'm still sorting through all those Grenadine X Gold Rush crosses. One of them makes these enormous red-skinned apples. Like, I don't think Gold Rush is really the other parent. It must be something else because it doesn't look at all like Gold Rush or Grenadine. Enormous apples with red flesh of at least like decent quality. This thing has just started fruiting, but it just produced a mass of these huge apples. So I've got that all straightened up. It's going to get a little more light this year. We'll see what it does this year. I'll try to thin it out a little bit. That's definitely getting grafted out. That's Grenadine X Gold Rush 11.4. There's going to be more from what's already planted in those trial rows that comes out that's worth growing and naming. Then, of course, there's all the stuff coming after that. So where am I at with this whole project? First of all, I'm backlogging seedlings. I'm on year 3. The seeds for this past pollination season are planted. The seedlings from 3 years ago are grafted onto dwarfing rootstock in a nursery bed, and they're already, yay tall. And then the seedlings from the next year I'm leaving in the ground. So I planted, the seeds, I transplanted them into nursery beds, and I'm just going to leave them there and not graft them out until I have a place to take them. The seedlings from this year are in small pots, but I'll transplant those into a nursery bed, and I'm just going to leave those in the ground and grow them. So I have 3 years backlogged that need to be planted somewhere. The plan is to buy a new homestead with more flat land, some hopefully like fertile, flat farmland. Lots of water, good sun, etc., and all the other stuff that I want out of a piece of property so that I can do my stuff in the woods that I do and do that kind of content, be able to teach classes there, be able to have interns, start to involve more people in all this whole thing. It's a tough call. Land prices here are going way down right now, like way down. It's crazy. But, the properties I look at where I'm like, this is what I need. Like, this is what I need to not be boxed in and limited and have to work within like something that I want to expand out of. Those properties are like typically 600,000 and up, and last year they were like 1.5, 1.2 million, but some of those are coming way down. So we'll see, but that's still kind of out of my range. I'm probably more right now. It just depends on what I can get together. If I can get a loan, if someone will finance it. I don't know what my range is, but probably 400, 450, and hopefully I'll have enough money by the end of the season to start looking. But really, I'm just going to try to hold out as long as it takes to get a decent place, something that I don't feel like is too much of a compromise, and be able to expand into that. Because My YouTube channel is about to hit 100,000 subscribers. If I can grow that, which I can't right now because I don't have time to make videos, I'm busy trying to make money. Look at me making this video like at the last minute, trying to get it out in time before the auctions start closing. But if my audience continues to grow, then Patreon will grow, right? And everything will grow, you know. Just my total income from all those type of sources will keep growing. And I have other things cooking too. But very difficult to do it on my own. I may take on an intern this summer. So if anyone's interested, I need someone who is, you know, enthusiastic, who likes working, like, you know, likes working on stuff that is just meaningful. And, you know, really it's the attitude, like you want to be part of something that's bigger than yourself. You know, I don't do any of this for me. I don't want money so I can buy like better cars or watches or some stupid crap like that. I just want access to money so I can leverage it into all these projects I want to do and pay for materials and labor and especially land. That's the big one, and that's the first priority. So that's where I'm at. If it takes me a couple of years to get out of here and just save enough and find the right place, I'm tempted to just jump on something now because the prices are really low and I'm probably not going to go much lower. I'm just hoping they kind of hold for a couple of years and give me time to a look. Maybe I'll meet someone who's like really likes what I do and will give me a good deal with a good interest rate and carry the loan themselves. We'll see. So yeah, auctions start ending this afternoon, and all of them the Saturday auctions are all done by 10 p.m. tonight Eastern time, and Sunday auctions are all over by 10 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow, Sunday. Cool, exciting. This whole project's going great. I can't even believe how many interesting, fun, worthwhile apples I've already come up with in one generation. Like I haven't fruited. I've made lots of second generation crosses. You know, I use my apples all the time to make new apples or seeds, but none of them have fruited yet. Once those fruit, I'll be making third generation crosses. Like what's going to come out of all these, plus all the seeds and I send out and the pollen people that I send out, people use to make crosses, and all the stuff that you guys are just picking your own parents and making. Incredible. Like apple diversity is about to just blow up. Like, I'm not sure you guys understand just how impactful all this is going to be to apple genetics and how interesting and how much cool stuff we're going to come out. Johnny Appleseed's got nothing on us because we have a lot of advantages. First of all, he wouldn't breed anything. He didn't believe in grafting. I don't think he believed in breeding. He's just planting like random seeds. But if the power of taking at least like, even over that, just taking really, really good apples and being super select about which apples you grow from seed and not just getting like a straight run from the cider mill, that's powerful. But taking two parents and, you know, having a plan and a vision and be inspired, but to cross two apples together, entirely different game. And we've lost a lot of our apple diversity in terms of like there used to be a lot of varieties. In recreating that and cranking out more new varieties, we're going to do it with a lot more real diversity, which is like actual genetic diversity, diversity of flavor, diversity of seasons, and all these traits because of just that little bit of intention. Yeah, it's going to be chaotic. It's chaotic, but it's focused. It's like a focused chaos, and it's going to work. It's already working. It's amazing. Can't wait to see what all you guys come up with and taste some of those apples in the future and taste the upcoming generations. So cool. This project is amazing. It's gone so well. Blew my mind this year. All right, bid high, bid often. Let's get me a new place so I can get these trees in the ground before they overgrow and see what comes of them.